I'm honored, truly honored, to introduce you to our special guest today, Joy Beckerman. Joy is a living legend, truly, an internationally renowned hemp advocate and a law and policy expert. As her name suggests, just a joy to talk with and get to meet, as you'll soon find out. Such an exciting, positive presence. We just love her energy. She's been actively involved in the hemp industry for over 30 years. Extraordinary passion for this versatile, valuable, and plant-saving crop is contagious. Among many roles, Joy's the principal at Hemp International, which is a consulting, legal support, and expert witness firm serving the global community. She also serves on multiple nonprofit hemp and cannabis-related boards and committees. Joy, we're delighted you could join us today. Welcome to Understanding CBD. Thank you for joining us.
I am so excited to be here, guys, and what an awesome song to start the show. Thank you for that great pick.
Thank you.
And it only gets better from here, Joy. It only gets better
Trust
from here.
us.
But yeah,
Awesome.
we want to thank you, obviously, for everything you've done, your bravery, your passion that you bring to the table, your focus. It really is inspiring, and we're really honored to have you on the show. Finally, I guess Max, it only took us 80 episodes, right?
That's it.
So if that's any advice for young kids, don't give up, right?
Don't give up.
Keep going. Good things do happen.
Keep at it.
Anyway, we want to, once we get to know you a little bit later, we'll get to know you a bit first. We'll get to some other things, but what I wanted to know really was, how did cannabis make its way into your life?
It is a part of everybody. If you even look back into your own childhood, like when was the first time that you heard of this thing? So I guess the reality is, in high school is the first time that I consumed cannabis. And so it was a part of my life really since probably I was age, I think 15, the first time that I consumed cannabis. And so only knew about it from the perspective of, frankly, relief, spirituality, a different train of thought, dancing, relaxation. But it really didn't become a major part of my life until I began to follow the Grateful Dead in 1990.
Wow. So what about in the Grateful Dead? What happened there that changed for you?
Because the Grateful Dead, actually, and I was a bit of a poster child for the Grateful Dead, bear in mind that it was really as much of a traveling, amazing circus that it was. The Grateful Dead was carrying the torch of all of these movements, all of these revolutions of consciousness, of religion, of veganism, of home birth. I learned about everything. I mean, I ended up having my 2 children at home because of information that I learned on Grateful Dead Tour. And what I learned on Grateful Dead Tour in the spring of 1990 was some excerpts from the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which is really the foundation or the Bible of the hemp and all forms of cannabis movements, written by Jack Herer, may he rest in peace, and edited by Chris Conrad, who's still with us, thank goodness, and such a prolific activist. And it just transformed the information that this plant that had been this sort of clandestine, dark, hide about it, shouldn't be very proud, people don't look upon this well, all of those social taboos. All of a sudden, I was given this enlightening bit of information that this plant is not something to be ashamed of. This plant not only had the American government, who had been the entire global bullies, by the way, for global prohibition, tried to remove the plant, eradicate the plant from our consciousness, but also tried to remove all knowledge of the plant from our consciousness. And that, in fact, just from these few facts that I had learned, our libraries, our encyclopedias, our books, our history books, and our books about every industry should be filled with knowledge of this plant, and it is not. And so at that point, what kicked in for me was a sense of planetary healing, a sense of justice, combined with how I was already feeling about this one aspect of this plant, which was smoking it. And it was a convergence that literally altered the trajectory of my entire life. It affected me on a cellular level, just the information.
So Steve and I were talking before the show about how I've been to a single Dead show back when I was in school, and he said he was at a Dead show. And the last thing I was thinking about at a Dead show was learning about anything from a book or really applying that in any entrepreneurial way. Admittedly, I was more just enjoying the experience, if you know what I'm saying. I do want to talk about the fact that, so your book, or the book that you read, had an influence for you to take an entrepreneurial step forward, and you had a store at some point that you opened?
Yes, so I opened the first store in the state of New York, post-prohibition, I guess, hemp store in the state of New York in the early 90s. Heaven on Earth, right there in Woodstock, New York. It really inspired me to bring forth this consciousness. I mean, it wasn't popular at the time. It was, we'd do another show sometime in a year from now if you folks want to have me back, so I can tell you about the cease and desist letter that I got from the U.S. Secret Service, because it takes a good 5 minutes to tell. It's a fascinating story, but I really subjected myself to all kinds of law enforcement attention, the Woodstock police, which is what led to the cease and desist order, were constantly in there trying to buy marijuana from me, which of course I wasn't selling. They tried to, they sent my twine to Albany for testing for THC. They sent my sterilized seeds to Albany for testing for THC. When all of that came back negative, they sent the dollar bills, which every single dollar bill that went in and out of the store was stamped with "I grew hemp" coming out of George Washington's mouth. And so when they couldn't, all of that, they sent that to the U.S. Secret Service. So I got a cease and desist order for mutilating U.S. currency, which I completely won and resisted. And that's what makes the story. But the bottom line is, no, it wasn't popular, and it was and folks were afraid to come into the store as well, as you might imagine. So I had to close it by 1996. Well, and then I went to Vermont and ran 3 hemp stores there.
Nice.
Right. So, and then you transitioned from that into becoming a complex civil litigation paralegal, which, by the American Bar Association description, is an indispensable paralegal has the ability to multitask, strong attention to detail, willingness to learn, and expertise in organization and psychic abilities. Is that you? Is that why you made the transition?
I thank you for asking. I was raised by a really hardcore attorney in the state of Maine and went to school. I was an English major and also studied paralegal studies at Fisher College. But yes, that is absolutely me. And my sons, who are now 27 and 29, both of whom have earned their masters in the last couple of months, they got a little older, as it were. And so running hemp stores and the like was not cutting the mustard in terms of the quality of life that I wanted as a single mother to provide for my children. And so I relocated the family to Seattle, which is a very vibrant economy, very friendly to single mothers and families, and began that dual career in compliance and complex civil litigation with hemp so that I could keep them in football cleats and, God help me, little Ralph Lauren polo logos.
Well, beautiful. It's nice that we got to know you a little bit. And in anticipation of your arrival today, Max was busy and he built constructed a time machine. And he actually constructed it out of hemp. Anyway, it's fun. It's fun talking with you on the radio, and it's you're used to this, right? You have a podcast of your own, right? Tell us about that.
I do. Hemp Barons is a podcast that I've been doing since I think June of 2019, and I do lots of educating and public speaking. So very used to all of this, and tangents happen. I trust the plant during all those conversations.
Well, and that's where we're going right now.
I trusted the plant too. All weekend long I spent building a time machine for you. I built it out of hemp. I used the fiber. I used the seeds. I used everything, actually. How do you like that?
Awesome. I believe it. It can do it all.
And I'm turning the controls over to you because I'm sure you want to take us through a trip back in time before cannabis wasn't prohibited. And when the plant was expressing its true purpose and really delivering on its promise. So I'm officially handing you the switch. You turn it on and go for it, Joy.
All right, mister, and I'm going to be mindful of time because what a journey it is. So first, I like us to ponder when I tell this story, just in America alone, although this plant, of course, is at least 10,000 years old, originating as far as we can tell in China. But let's bring it to America. Hempstead, Long Island, Hempstead County, Arkansas, Hempstead, Texas, Hemp Hill, North Carolina, Hempfield, Pennsylvania. Guys, this plant has been a huge part of even U.S. History. In fact, we wouldn't have the U.S. The Mayflower sails and all of its rigging and the clothes that people were wearing and even the oakum, which held between the boards of the Mayflower, of course, were all hemp. It was, in fact, of such tremendous need for our nation's security that our very first cannabis law here in the United States was actually in 1619 in the Jamestown colony, ordering farmers to make trial, meaning grow, make trial of the Indian hemp seed. Between 1631 and the early 1800s, we were actually able to use hemp as U.S. currency. People paid their taxes with it. It was that encouraged and that of necessity. There were even times where we had periods of shortage in the United States. Between 1763 and 1767 is one example, again, in Jamestown or in various parts of Virginia, that farmers could even be jailed for not producing hemp. We depended on it that much. And taking ourselves out of the U.S. just for a second, because it comes back in a United States way, analogous way, when we get up to World War II. But in 1812, Napoleon's War of 1812, Napoleon actually strategically invaded Russia to cut off the English Navy's supply of hemp. Most developed countries, which time being all relative, including England at the time, still did not grow enough of its own demand. There was such a demand for hemp. I mean, the world supply of paper, textiles, all of those things. And so they largely depended on Russia. Napoleon was able to invade Russia, cripple the English Navy supply. That was very strategic and successful. We'll put a pin in that. In 1850, our own United States Census shows that we had 8,327 hemp plantations in the United States, wow. A plantation being no less than a 200-acre farm in that definition. So be mindful that that 8,327 number didn't even account for the many family plots, hundreds and thousands of family hemp plots and smaller than plantation hemp farms that were throughout the United States. Then in 1930, I mean, we went through, guys are better living through chemistry. We had to go through it. Let's not judge it. Humanity had to deal with it. We finally are starting to understand that better living through chemistry is not sustainable or regenerative. But when all of these things started to happen, and it really started to happen around 1794 is the reality in terms of the first, what I call the foundational underpinning of cannabis prohibition, in that the cotton gin was invented. Well, once these machines are invented and patents are granted, at that point, that machine needs to make money. We've got special interests. We've got to snuff out the competition. So there was incredible special interest around fiber wars in the South that resulted, of course, and continued for decades from the invention of the cotton gin. But we also had, of course, synthetic polymer, petroleum, based plastics and nylons being invented. We also had the wood craft, cellulose, paper, and pulp inventions. That patent alone had to snuff out hemp, right? Which is horrible environmentally. Think of how much lignin is in a tree. And the other sort of fourth foundational linchpin there would be that by 1925 we had 5 pages of cannabis preparations in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, but they weren't patented, so nobody potentially really knew, why they worked. But in 1927, we learned how to extract salicylic acid from willow bark, making the first aspirin or analgesic competition to these cannabis preparations. So you have all of this better living through chemistry stuff happening to eventually want to snuff out the competition. And so in 1930, then Secretary of the Treasury Andrew Mellon of Mellon Bank of Alcoa appoints Henry Anslinger to be executive director of the FBN, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which we know today as the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. And he embarks on what becomes really a 7-year social engineering campaign to demonize this street scourge that did not exist of marijuana, when really it was a major convergence, a harmonic convergence of special interests that led to eventually the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, which is in fact its own show. Now, the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act simply taxed and regulated all forms of cannabis out of existence, essentially, and farmers went on to serve other crops. But bear in mind that it wasn't until 1970, the Controlled Substances Act, where it became an actual felony simply to possess a seed capable of germination. But in between there, remember I told you to stick a pin in what Napoleon did to Russia, we had World War II. Well, 1937, we tax and regulate hemp out of existence, and guess what happens? In 1941, Japan strategically invades Manila to cut off the United States' Navy's supply of hemp and cripples our Navy. So what happens is the USDA, and folks, please, if you're bored or curious, at some point when you get on YouTube, I want you to Google Hemp for Victory. Take the one that's about 14 minutes long so you don't get some hippie's dissertation on what is really just about a 14-minute USDA and 4-H film called Hemp for Victory that was distributed in 1941, basically begging farmers to plant hemp seeds in the United States. USDA actually had to distribute 400,000 pounds of hemp seeds to American farmers from Wisconsin to Kentucky throughout the war so they could produce 42,000 tons of hemp fiber annually until 1946 for the English Navy. Again, we've got that Controlled Substances Act. Nothing happens after 1970 other than people like me and an army of people like me coming in and trying to legalize this plant in all of its forms. And I've also formally sat on National Normal Board of Directors. I currently sit on the International Normal Women's Alliance. We're still very much trying for adult use and medical, and we will get there. But in 2014, the 2014 Farm Bill passed. It created agricultural pilot programs to study the growth, cultivation, and marketing of this new thing defined for the first time in U.S. history. Industrial hemp was given a definition and thereby was being distinguished from its cousins, sisters, adult use and medical cannabis. And then, of course, in 2018, we had the 2018 Farm Bill, which then moves hemp from this agricultural pilot sort of research state into a full-on agricultural commodity, removing hemp and tetrahydrocannabinols derived from hemp from the shackles of the Controlled Substances Act. And now hemp and tetrahydrocannabinols derived from hemp have reclaimed their place in the broad light of day with all of America's other legal agricultural commodities. So it has been, quite a journey. And to sum it up, as I like to say through the years, 1619 is everyone must make trial of hemp. 1763, you must grow hemp or you will be jailed. 1937, you must apply for and pay a very special tax if you would like to grow hemp. 1942, we really need you to grow hemp for the war. 1970, don't you dare grow hemp. 2014, make trial of hemp to study its growth and marketing. And 2018, please grow hemp again as an agricultural commodity. And we are now seeing hundreds of millions of dollars being poured into the reemergence of this crop.
What a terrible marriage. God, right? It's that's what it reminded me
Tumultuous.
of. Exactly. Which mixed messages here, right? Very frustrating.
Where are the roses?
Thank you for really taking us through that. This really is scratching the surface, and we have so many questions to get to. Some of the interesting questions that come up for me is when hemp was grown and it was in its hemp day, right? It was everywhere. What happened to all the machinery and equipment that was used to process it? Because they were making sales, right? They were making textiles. What happened to everything? Did it just, what happened?
Excellent question. And when you see that movie Hemp for Victory, you'll see the incredible machinery right here in the United States making these ropes and these textiles, right? Well, we eventually, manufacturing alone, we've been giving away our jobs and our economy to the competition for decades, not just in hemp, but in everything, textile manufacturing alone. So a lot of that equipment was melted, sunk into the ground, and some of it, from what I understand, was sold to Mexico, and they're not using it either. So that's ultimately what happened is a convergence of other bad decisions around. And I'm not going to sit here and lambaste capitalism, but around our exploration of the free market, there have been all kinds of bad decisions along the way that have led to where we are at right now with a lack of jobs, a lack of manufacturing here, and ultimately we simply are not using them. We are reinventing and re-infrastructuring all of that equipment and processing and manufacturing now.
the prohibition was terrible. I mean, a lot of people suffered. I'm sure a lot of people were jailed. I mean, and I'm sure you have a lot of insight around that. But a lot of, let's call them entities, got very rich. And, we could probably guess who some of those entities are. I'm sure you have an opinion about that. What do you think?
Absolutely. Well, we certainly know the pharmaceutical industry, which remains, we don't have the same, from a hemp perspective, we don't have the same lobbyists against us as we did back then because, the oil and gas industry is well aware that they have finite resources and are putting a ton of money into investigating all of these renewable resources for fuel and things. But pharmaceutical industry, certainly, they are still a major player in the fight against all forms of cannabis. So they got very wealthy, obviously. Certainly industry, again, plastics, textiles, building materials. When you snuff out a plant that was doing all of these things, those are the industries that are going to take over. But certainly the plastics, nylons, fuels, paper, and textile industries became quite wealthy. And then to remove the hemp seed, which is the most digestible form of protein in the entire plant and animal kingdom, although there's some recent research saying, well, it's commensurate with this, it's commensurate with that. It's about 60% edistin protein, which is globular and more easily digested. I mean, so even food, every aspect, but absolutely paper, plastics, energy, and pharmaceuticals.
Looking back to the young girl at the Dead concert, is it what you imagined today would be like? From a hemp perspective, let's give you some.
It's bigger. It's better. Real life is almost always better than you can imagine. I mean, we have so much farther to go. But guys, this is a dream come true. And when I speak with students, especially college students or younger, I say dream big and don't stifle those dreams because you'll achieve them. And then you got to dream bigger. And no, I didn't. I didn't. And I had an unrealistic view. I thought the whole world was going to be covered in hemp and that would be monocropping. So, there's so much that I've learned since that 20-year-old girl in 1990. But no, it's bigger, better, awesomer. We are cooking with gas, people,
Yes.
And it's awesome.
Well, good. Speaking of, so we're cooking, right? So I've got this hemp time machine that I'm tweaking right now. I just lubricated it with a little hemp oil. And now we're going to take a trip to the future. That's what this is about. So the year is 2036. It's 15 years in the future, and apparently only half the time you've been working with the plant. So what's it looking like for the plant? Is it free? I mean, are we free? Is anything free?
By 2036, I think that we'll have a lot less of the hysterical regulation that we are dealing with right now, both from just a growing perspective with this constant focus on the THC, Delta-9 THC. I think by then we will be regulating based on the intended use of the crop. So I think that crops that are intended for industrial purposes will have regulation for industrial purposes, which means why would we care how much THC is in this plant? It's not going to be consumed by a human or an animal. Or if it's going to be grown for medical purposes or dietary supplement purposes. And by that, I'm talking about all forms of cannabis. So my hope is that by 2036, given the tremendous consciousness revolution that's happening right now, that there is, and I think that there's sort of an acceleration of understanding and an evolution of consciousness that's happening right now because there's so much going on in the world. Plant medicine, fungus, climate change, environmental innovations in industry. So all of that is happening at once, I think, will lead us to regulating cannabis as cannabis. And if it's cannabis that's industrial, then those are the regulations. Medical, those are the regulations. Nutritional, those are the regulations. That type of thing. And I certainly see that we will have learned. The FDA will have long since created a regulatory framework for hemp extract, which I do predict probably will not include isolate. I think isolate, unless we have a major revolution of our food and drug laws, will probably remain in a pharmaceutical category, but the full spectrum hemp extract and broad spectrum hemp extracts within a certain allowable daily milligram maximum amount will be available from a dietary supplement and hopefully food additive perspective. And of course, that in terms of paper, textile, building materials, energy storage, charcoal fuel, pellets, nanotechnology, bioplastics, that all of these things have now well started to integrate this incredible plant, which is, not just creating economic stability or environmental stability. The reality is that when you introduce hemp in an R&D proven way into your existing products, it has superior capabilities that is going to make your product bigger, faster, stronger, taking less energy, creating more value in the value chain, supply chain, nutritional chain, whatever it is. So I think we're going to see some real delivering on the promise.
Well, and I do love your vision that you're painting there for the future. Now, I have a huge fear, okay, and I'm not one to hold myself back, so I'm going to put it out on the table. I'm a small business owner. And in most of the communities that we've seen over the past decade or so have been decimated by the Walmarts, now Amazon, Costco. Even though I love it, sorry, Linda, it's a great company, but it's loaded with plastic and garbage. The FDA has just taken a big step in destroying small business with the vapor industry and siding with big tobacco. What can we do, because I know we can do something, to make sure that this plant doesn't end up in the hand of corporate greed and everybody that paid the price over the years for believing in it and standing up for it? What can we do to really ensure that there's some earmarks for us, the people?
So there is a difference between, I think the answer is going to be slightly different for hemp right now than it will be for adult and medical use. But having said that, because we have the USDA from a hemp perspective, and I hope that we're going to have the USDA on our side when we can federally legalize other forms. But bear in mind that developing rural America, which is small businesses, which is the heartbeat of America, rural farmers, rural economy, rural jobs, is a huge part of what the USDA does and what agriculture is about. And so in that respect, I think we have a lot of ears and listening. So as long as the advocates and academia and the nonprofits and the for-profits, we're all working together on this plant with the USDA and with our local state departments of ag, we're going to be able to have sound arguments that must be listened to continue for smaller businesses and very small businesses and sole proprietors to be able to stay engaged. When we get into the more pharmaceutical aspects of it, it's going to be interesting to see because obviously we've got CGMP, current good manufacturing practice, in the codes of federal regulations, which can be very expensive. So hardcore advocacy. The Small Business Administration is very much on the side for hemp for small businesses. We're going to need to appeal to the Small Business Administration for these other forms of cannabis as well. They will be a major partner and advocate for small businesses.
How do you choose what to buy? Actually, they're assuming you've been to a medical marijuana dispensary. They say, how do you choose what to buy at the dispensary?
I always go in, guys, not that they're going to be able to ask, but this is also how I judge my dispensaries. I say, I would like an organic female grown. Show me the organic female grown plant products. Now, mostly they say female grown, and then I'm like, yep, I want to know if a female grew the plant. Do you know who your growers are? Because I just prefer that. And then I want the most organic or pesticide free, and we start from there. And then if I'm being honest, guys, from there I say, of those, what's on sale?
Gotcha. So like looking at cannabinoids or terpenes, that's less important than it is about the female grown and what the inputs are of the plant. Makes sense. That's good advice.
For me, it absolutely is. I have my favorite strains. Gorilla Glue, Afghan hash plant. I certainly have my favorite strains, but it is far more important to me, can I support a female grower, and what are the inputs in this plant?
All right, great. We got a family question here. At what age is it okay to talk to my kids about cannabis?
Guys, my children were born into marijuana smoke. I had 2 home births in ceremony. We had Nag Champa incense. We had cannabis smoke. So my children don't know anything but a life of cannabis. My children, by the way, who are National Honor Society student athletes, both of them just got their master's degree in the last 2 months, one of whom was the president of the UK MBA Student Association, the other one who was the chair of the UW Chancellery Advisory Council. You know, I have outstanding overachieving
Chip off the old block.
It's like handing me my lighter by the time they were 4.
Nice.
There's your answer.
That's my answer.
Right? There's your answer.
Get them started early.
You don't not talk about it. You simply, it's part of my culture, my spirituality. My children were raised in it literally from birth.
There's no reason to vilify it. That's the point. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, and exactly.
I mean, I'd be a little embarrassed about my alcohol consumption, which I didn't consume while I was parenting, but certainly not my consumption of this plant.
Word.
Great. Well, we are getting close to the end, Joy, and you've taken us on a great ride. We'd like to know, is there something we missed or a message that, in closing, you'd like to impart on the listeners?
I think that's a yes.
Thank you for asking. Buy hemp. That is how we continue to create the demand for this industry, to tell these entrepreneurs and investors that it is a safe, good bet for them to invest their dollars into the infrastructure, which we very much need to process this plant. Buy hemp. Whatever choice you're making, whatever product you're buying, please see, whether it's food, whether it's for your body, for your home, my textiles, my curtains and my sheets and my towels and my bath mat, they are all hemp, guys. Make that choice. Please buy hemp. That is one of the greatest things that you can do to advance this incredible plant and to deliver on this promise of this emerging economy is buy hemp. And the other is to please go to hempsupporter.com, which is a 501c4 nonprofit advocacy organization, the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which does the most important advocacy work in hemp. We will never bombard you with emails, just when there's a call to action. And then we need you to take those 60 seconds to engage in the process, to make your voice heard. We get tremendous, unbelievable effects with all of the states and with the federal Congress when we use our hempsupporter.com voice software for different bills at the state and congressional level. So engage in the process, buy hemp, go to hempsupporter.com so that you can have your voice heard. Those are the 2 greatest things we can do, and I'm really grateful you asked me that question, guys.
Joy, what a pleasure to have you on the show. We really appreciate it. Thank you for giving us all of that sage advice, as well as the contact information about how our listeners, both live and on the podcast, can get involved and actually make a difference. And we agree, buy hemp. And if it's in CBD form, buy Max and Stevens.
That's right. Joy, how do people get in touch with you? I know if they heard you speaking here, they'd want you to speak at their event or to their team, or they just want some consultation. How do people reach you?
Well, they can reach me at hempace.com, like the ace of spades or the ace of hemp, as it were, hempace.com, spelled just as you'd think it would be spelled. And gentlemen, thank you, because you do such a tremendous job creating this platform, getting this important information out to the people and doing the best that you can, and you succeed so well with the incredible products that you make and the information that you provide. You guys are awesome.